other idea about the tournament was that teams don't take it seriously, right? U.S. Open Cup gets shtick all the time because MLS teams roll out a B or C level squad, use it as a rotation match. Why would I go watch the backups play, right? And again, I'm going to speak from the Red Bull experience because that's what I do. Um, our two designated players didn't start two of the three games, or if you're Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, you didn't start any of the games. Julian Hall, a 17-year-old, started all three matches. We gave debuts to a bunch of Red Bull 2 kids, including friend of the pod, Audrey Memedy. Congratulations, Audrey, on your official debut. Well done. Um, and while they still held their own, Red Bull did. I think MLS is still at a point where the stars draw more eyes and more butts in seats than the team or the game itself. So if you are telling me that okay, I'm not going to play whoever in this, this tournament, I'm not going to play Emil Forsberg, I'm not going to play Choupo-Moting, a lot of people are like, okay, well, what's the point? So, what are your thoughts on the approach there?
Yeah, I mean, attendance is going to hurt the more Leagues Cup gets a reputation of people rotating or teams not necessarily being fully invested in it. And I think you're kind of trending, if not already at the point where it's very similar to the way you looked at old US Open Cup, where you were going to have maybe a couple teams that care about it and are willing to kind of put some effort into it, maybe especially the teams that have been struggling in the current regular season. And then you're going to have teams that are just like, this is a waste of our time. We don't want to risk injuries, or maybe this is a good opportunity for us to rotate, see some new people in the team. And so they're going to do that. And then inevitably, the more that happens, the less you're going to draw crowds, the more times you're in Leagues Cup. So like next year, like if you're one of the people who went to a Red Bull game this year and the team is fully rotated, next year when Leagues Cup rolls around, you're going to be like, I don't want to buy a ticket to this because I'm going to be watching Red Bull 2 play.
Hmm. Yeah, and I won't say it was completely Red Bull too. I mean, they had some of their starters in there, and it was more a chance to rest and give the second group, our reserves, debuts. And you had a couple of Red Bull 2 who were getting their opportunity. But still, again, if you're going to say this tournament matters and this tournament is the most important thing out there, how are you going to sit there and tell me you're not gonna play your starters for it, right? And at the end of the day, this goes back. So let me get back for a second here. Just because the coaches didn't approach it in the way that we would expect them to does not mean the players didn't care, right? Every game that I watch, and I watched a good amount of them this year, even though I felt tired. Every single game, you saw Liga MX teams getting into scraps with MLS teams. They were getting pushing off the ball, late challenges, hard tackles, 50-50s. I mean, the level of the game itself was good. Was that because it was their chance to make a name for themselves? They were young guys who really didn't get a chance to play much? Maybe, right? Was it because they had a Champions Cup spot and a big payday that could have been on the maybe, right? But I think it's an interesting comparison to see how this tournament's being treated relative to US Open Cup because it's also much easier to manage US Open Cup because it's a game every few weeks instead of three games in 7 days or whatever your math works out to, right? So this isn't me saying like, oh, Leagues Cup has to go because nobody cares about it anymore, or U.S. Open Cup needs to stay away because nobody cares about it anymore. But I think both, and you were making a good point to this, both provide legitimate value to the soccer landscape in America and MLS as a whole. But the more Leagues Cup gets treated like U.S. Open Cup, the more validity that its critics have in saying that it's an unnecessary money grab tournament and they would rather, play in U.S. Open Cup because of whatever, take all this effort you've put into Leagues Cup, put it into U.S. Open Cup and see what happens. And they'd have a solid leg on to stand on. Blah, blah, blah. They'd have a solid leg to stand on, in my opinion. And, it's and by the way, they always have had a relatively solid one, but the more Leagues Cup kicks on, the more strong that leg gets, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, let's then move on to just some reviews of the actual phase one itself, right? So let's talk about some most impressive teams. Give me a Liga MX and give me an MLS team that you were like, good showing, friends.
So I will say Liga MX is pretty easy. Um, I'm gonna go with Puebla. I think that's the easy choice for Liga MX, considering in their league they have been dreadful this season, including a 7-0 stomping yesterday against Tigres. However, they still managed to get their way out of the Liga MX group and are in the knockout stages, which is miraculous considering the level of quality that is on the Liga MX side. They just seem to really know how to play against MLS sides, it appears. From the MLS sides as well, there's another very obvious one. I don't feel like I should take both obvious ones from you. So I
No, no, go
will I
ahead
will do
because I knew you were going to do this, so I went less obvious. So go on.
okay. I will take the Galaxy then. The Galaxy was a very big surprise in this tournament. I do feel like they've been turning things in a better direction. Granted, it really couldn't have gotten much worse than where it once was I remember when we previously had talked about them. However, this was definitely way above what I think a lot of people had expected performance-wise out of them. 10 goals scored, a +7 goal differential, 7 points on the bounce with 2 wins and a PK loss. Very much feels reminiscent of last year Galaxy. It almost feels like they found a little footing again.